Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about the Winnipeg Jets. The Winnipeg Jets, of course, keeping Pierre-Luc Dubois, signing him to a one-year deal. Now, it's possible that within a week they've traded him and all that, and that signing him to a one-year deal just makes it easier to trade him. There is that possibility. But Winnipeg's also not in a position where they could just lose Dubois without replacing him down the middle. They have to have a center to replace him. The Winnipeg Jets this past year were 39, 32, and 11. 89 points, 8 points back of Nashville. Now, Kevin Cheveldayoff has been the general manager in Winnipeg the entire time they've been in Winnipeg, since the return of the Jets and all that. And so the debate about whether or not Cheveldayoff is an excellent GM has been out there for a long time, whether or not he's a good GM. I remember in the beginning with the Jets, I felt like he wasn't aggressive enough. I felt like he was too willing to stand pat. And now I'm starting to see that from a lot of people. I heard TSN talking about how stale Winnipeg looks. Here's the thing, though. Making change for the sake of making change is a bad idea. And so while I do agree that something needed to change, under Dave Lowry, the record didn't get a lot better. And now they've got Rick Bowness coming in. Now, Bowness can have a positive effect on a team over a short period of time. Absolutely. And I think it kind of feels like maybe this season they're going to go through with Bowness with the idea that next summer they're going to take a real push towards signing Barry Trotz. That may very well be the plan. If they brought in Barry Trotz, I think there'd be a lot more optimism around the Jets. As it stands, there's not. As I said, 8 points back in Nashville for that last playoff spot. Did they get better? No. But they have 8,446,310 in cap space, according to Cap Friendly. They've got guys signed, so they're one of those few teams that they have cap space. They can take on a contract if they need to. So if there's a team that's looking to dump somebody off so they have some cap space, Winnipeg might be the team they're calling, and the Jets might be able to make out pretty well on that. Look what Carolina did, picking up Pacioretty, picking up Burns. You know, the Jets are in a position to do something similar. Not necessarily that huge, but they're in a position to do something similar. So I don't necessarily write them off as not doing anything. Stastny, of course, is still out there, hasn't signed a contract anywhere. There's still the possibility he returns to Winnipeg. He got his 800th career NHL point in their final game on May 1st this year against Seattle. And maybe Stastny ends up back in Winnipeg. If he doesn't, I think that's okay. I look at him down the middle, though. They've got Scheifele, who had 29 goals, 41 assists, 70 points in 67 games. You can set your watch by this guy getting point per game. He signed through 2024. Now, of course, it was debatable whether or not he'd be back. That seems to have settled down. I haven't heard a lot about Scheifele recently. Dubois, of course, likely second-line center, 28 goals, 32 assists, 60 points in 81 games. And he's a restricted free agent again next summer. So unlike the Tkachuk situation, where if he had signed a one-year extension with Calgary, he would have been a UFA next summer. They still have say in what happens with Dubois next summer. So are they kicking the can down the road? Absolutely. But they're likely looking at their depth chart and saying, look, if we lost Dubois, if we traded him, we don't get a top two center back. That means Lowry might be our number two center. Perfetti might be our number two center. Tony Nato might end up being our number three center. Like it's not an ideal situation, right? So you have to get a top two center back. Sort of like Tkachuk gets traded, you bring in Huberdeau if you're the Flames. You're not dropping off points. You're changing the makeup of your team, sure, but you're still going to be able to put the puck in the net. Now, Lowry had a good year. 13 goals, 8 assists, 21 points, 79 games. He's signed through 2026. But as good of a year as Lowry had overall, he doesn't score enough to warrant even thinking about using for top six, right? Tony Nato, much the same. 7 goals, 7 assists. He's signed through 2023, so he's a UFA next summer. You look on the left side, and this might be their strength, right? You've got Kyle Connor, 47 goals, 46 assists, 93 points. He's signed till 2026. There is no real reason to panic if you're the Jets, if you believe in this lineup. So if you're the Jets and you believe this team can bounce back, there's no reason to be panicked about next summer. Nick Ehlers, 28 goals, 27 assists, 55 points in 62 games. He's signed till 2025. So that's your top two left wingers. They're both signed for minimum of 3 years, and the other being signed for 4. Morgan Barron had a good finish to the season. I think he'll get a good look towards the lineup. 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points in 27 games. He is signed through next summer. He's a restricted free agent. Jensen Harkins, 7 goals, 6 assists, 13 points in 77 games. He's a UFA in 2024. I like Harkins, but the production just hasn't been there. But also, I would say he hasn't had a lot of chances to get that production either. So Harkins is one of those ones that to me is a little bit of a sleeper, that if you lose a key scorer and he jumps in, I think he might be capable of doing a little more than we've seen so far. Now, if you want a divided opinion, just ask anybody. So Blake Wheeler, huh? 65 games, 17 goals, 43 assists, 60 points. Wheeler scores points. It's what he does. He drives offense. Now, once you get into the advanced stats and some of the weeds on it, you ask yourself, does he help more than he hurts? And there are definitely some opinions that he hurts more than he helps. He is signed for 2 more years. So, with Blake Wheeler, there's no worry about having to trade him, but do they trade him, right? And if they do, who takes that contract and all that? Cole Perfetti likely will get that chance at the top 6 spot. Now, again, I'm using the depth chart just from cap friendly, because honestly, if I try to come up with lines, it just kind of becomes a mess. That guy doesn't play with that guy, stupid hockey guy. Fine, whatever. Perfetti, because people never change lines. 18 games for Perfetti this past season, 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points. I think they're hoping for good health from Perfetti in that upward trend. Perfetti has a lot of upside, and so it's easy to overlook him with everything else going on with the Jets. He also could potentially end up being a center at the National Hockey League level, right? Appleton, since coming back to Winnipeg, good. His stats overall in the season, 8 goals, 13 assists, 21 points in 68 games. He is, for the record, a restricted free agent. He likely won't eat up the rest of that $8.5 million. I don't think they'll give him $8.5 million a year. I've been surprised before. So Appleton being back in Winnipeg, I think was good. I think that signaled that they weren't selling at the deadline. They sold Kopp, but then they went out and got Appleton, who I think had a rough time in Seattle. I'm glad to see him back in Winnipeg. Kirby Reichel could end up on that 4th line, sure. 13 games, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. They signed Stenlund out of Columbus. He played 3 games for Columbus last year. He signed through 2024, or 2023, I should say. David Gustafsson just played the 2 games in Winnipeg. He's a restricted free agent currently, also unlikely to eat that whole $8 million cap space there. You have Chaz Lucius, who signed his entry-level contract. So I've got 2025 in parentheses because that doesn't kick in if he doesn't play those 10 games this year. He has to play above 10 games. But if Lucius is good enough to get into the lineup right away this year, if he can push his way onto this roster, that could bolster their play down the middle quite a bit. If in fact he ends up playing down the middle, he may end up on a wing to start with, right? It's not that strange for a kid to come into the league, play the wing, learn this position. You don't have as much pressure if you're playing center, and then end up being a center in year 3 or year 4 of your career. Now, when you get into the blue line, this is where things get kind of murky, because there's a lot of players here, and there's only a certain amount of spots on the roster. And to me, it looks like they could make a move with a defenseman before the season gets going. You have Morrissey signed through 2028. 12 goals, 25 assists, 37 points in 79 games. Guy's a beast. He can do a little bit of everything. I really like Morrissey's game a lot, and he is signed for 6 more years. He's not going anywhere. DeMello, 76 games, 1 goal, 12 assists, 13 points. He's signed till 2024. I think he's played some of his best hockey as a Jet. Dylan Sandberg will get every opportunity to play this year. 5 assists in 15 games. He's a restricted free agent next summer. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't get a shot at a regular top 4 spot just out of the gate. We'll see how it goes, and then if it doesn't work very well, it gets dropped down probably within the first couple of weeks. You got Pionk, 77 games, 3 goals, 31 assists, 34 points. He signed till 2025. Brendan Dillon, 79 games, 3 goals, 17 assists, 20 points. He had a very good year. He signed through 2024, and then you got Nate Schmidt, 77 games, 4 goals, 28 assists, 32 points. He signed till 2025. But again, here's the problem. You got Logan Stanley, 58 games, 1 goal, 12 assists, 13 points. He's a restricted free agent next summer. If Logan Stanley's not going to be a regular for the Winnipeg Jets, if they offered him up in a trade, I would think there'd be teams looking at picking him up. He's a very big defenseman. He's young. But if they were looking to move a defenseman, I would think they'd hold on to Stanley. I'd be kind of surprised if Stanley was the one that got offered up, unless the Jets don't see that upside. I think Stanley, at the very least, could defensively become the beast of the NHL. Like, he is ridiculously big, and I think he's a good player, but again, they have depth, and if they decide to move on from him, they have the depth to use him to maybe beef up the forward group a bit. Capobianco, they bring in as a UFA, so depth on the blue line. Played 45 games with the Arizona Coyotes this past season. 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points. He's a restricted free agent in 2024. Then you have Heinola, 12 games, 5 assists. He's an RFA in 2024. Ville Heinola, it really feels to me like we're near a breaking point with Heinola. If he's not going to get a chance at playing a regular spot. So let's say Heinola gets in here instead of Sandberg. I think Heinola would be very excited to get that opportunity. In the event he's not going to get that opportunity, maybe this is the year we see Heinola end up being moved by the Winnipeg Jets. And then the debate can rage on about whether or not they're keeping kids out of the lineup in favor of other players that we've already seen have their struggles at points, and as a team, they may not be good enough to win those big games. Then you also have, and I'm intentionally saving him for last, Menelainen, who they're bringing back. Of course, he was an RFA a couple years ago. It was forgotten. He was the one RFA that just never signed. He and out of Dallas, it's fine. So anyways, Menelainen ends up signing, and now he's back in the NHL. He had 13 goals, 28 assists, 41 points for Karpat of Liga. He's a UFA next summer. So there's no risk to signing Menelainen, and I think he showed previously that he can play a top bottom 6 role in the National Hockey League. So we'll see whether or not he ends up winning a role. Maybe he gets in where Reichel is on this board here. But it's a question of, with the Winnipeg Jets right now, is this team better than the one that finished last season? My answer to that would be, I don't know that it has to be better. They just have to be more consistent. They ended up not being in a playoff spot. They had consistency issues. And this is where the conversation comes in about being stale and a roster that just needs a massive shakeup. We're still early enough in the summer that shakeup could come. Re-signing Dubois doesn't mean that shakeup's not coming. Re-signing Dubois means they keep that control. They keep him for this season at the very least, right? Or at the very least, he's signed, he's in their lineup, and then if they decide to make a move during the season, maybe early in the season, they can do that. Maybe you give it that first month, and if things aren't working out very well in Winnipeg, then you put Dubois on the market, and you see what kind of a return you can get. With Dubois, he's one of those players that, for me, is a little bit divisive, that I've seen him underrated by some and overrated by others. So, staying out of that conversation altogether, I understand why people really like Dubois. I also understand why there are others who would call him overrated. Get both sides of it. Now, in net, things are going to be interesting. You've got Hellebuck, 29, 27, and 10, 9-10 save percentage. He's a UFA in 2024. I think they've overplayed Hellebuck at times. I think it's shown. His stats have dropped back a bit when he's been overplayed. I think he's played when he's been hurt. The interesting thing is Eric Comrie had a very good finish to the season. Doesn't come back. Now he's got a shot at maybe the starting job in Buffalo. So they pick up David Riddick, who had a rough year for Nashville. Ends up 6-3-4, 886 save percentage. He's just signed for 1 year. But if Riddick gets off to a really bad start, does Burden finally get the opportunity to maybe end up being that backup goaltender? Or does Winnipeg look elsewhere? They need to be able to spell Hellebuck. They need to be able to give him some nights off, give him a bit more rest, and really do what they can to ensure that come playoff time, should this team make the playoffs, that Hellebuck is rested and ready to go on a bit of a run. I've talked about Calgary not going anywhere beyond the second round since 2004 in a video earlier today. Well, Winnipeg has never been to a Stanley Cup final in their franchise's history. They've got one conference final to their name. So showing some upward momentum and movement in the right direction towards the Stanley Cup would be huge for this market. And it'd be nice because this is a small market team that has managed to keep all of their guys on long-term contracts. And so there's not really anybody major coming up in 2023 as a UFA either. So they don't necessarily have to win now. However, in the event that this all falls apart, I mentioned with Tree Living that his job may very well end up being on the line. But Cheveldayoff at some point, you would think, would end up being on the chopping block for Winnipeg, and they'd end up looking elsewhere. So in the event that holding all this together doesn't work, we'd have to see some movement early in the season, in all likelihood. But I'd like to know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think Cheveldayoff's too patient? Do you think that there's members of this roster who can't stand other members? Because there's certainly been discussions about, separation in the locker room. You got guys on this side and guys on the other. It happen. I really honestly think that happens with a lot of teams when they're losing. I think it's easy to start doing finger pointing. I think it's easier to say, well, we're doing well. What are those guys? And so you end up with that break. And I think winning does a lot to fix those problems in the locker room. And I think that's what Cheveldayoff is betting on right now. So they still need to replace what they lost in Stastny. They still have the money to go out and sign a top 6 forward. There are still a few of those out there, right? And they still have the ability to make a deal this summer that could shake things up. So what would you do to shake things up? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.